This is, this is me, just a little background. These are some books I've co-written. I have a very broad background, started in the technical field when I started college in 1970, was writing programs right from the beginning. Uh, Eventually formed Net Objectives in 99, where I became more of a consultant, moved from technical work to process work. I co-founded the Lean Systems Society, which unfortunately is not in existence. I was also a co-founder of Lean Kanban University, which is now Kanban University with David Anderson. I'm not affiliated though with it anymore. And I was a contributor to SAFe mostly in the technical area, was the first non-That's Safe Agile Inc. SBCT, and a former gold partner. So I haven't been actively involved in SAFe for the last couple of years, but I follow it. I know how it's changed to 4.5, 5, and 5.1. And basically, this talk is going to be about, in a sense, maybe how I would, if you're having challenges with it, improve it. While working at the PMI, I was acquired by the PMI. My company was acquired in September of 2019. Mostly actually for the process work. I had something called Flex. And we are converting that to be what we call the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant workshop. It's going to be available in March. We're finalizing the deck. Some of the slides are from that. We don't go into SAFe in this workshop, but all the concepts of that workshop are agnostic and can be applied to anything. So it occurred to me that a lot of people could find value in taking what they have with SAFe and improving it. So what I did is basically have taken the concepts in the workshop and applied them. If I was taking what we've learned from the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant and wanted to work with a company that was doing SAFe, that's basically what I'm going to present to you tonight. And I'm going to do it in kind of 4 phases. First is what SAFe does well. There's a lot of reasons it's popular, but there's a particular problem that doesn't actually address well, and it's an inherent problem in actually any kind of knowledge work, or it doesn't have to be limited to software or IT, but it's particularly prevalent and it's important to understand. So I'm going to then back off to that. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges with SAFe. Why does it start well and then tend to stagnate? Because that's been my experience with it watching people. It's not inherent that that has to happen, but it seems to happen often enough. And why that happens, I'll have some conjectures about. I can't prove it in a sense because I've not done a scientific study of it, but I've been around it a lot, including having a case study that I led with Northwestern Mutual years ago, and then watched what happened to them. And they're just one of many cases I've seen. And then I'll go into the enhancing SAFe with Flex. Flex stands for Flow for Enterprise Transformation. Okay, so I'm hoping I'll have also about 15 minutes to answer questions at the end. If you have something you didn't understand, then I'll try to see if I can keep the chat box open, or I might see it. I'm not guaranteeing I'll see it, but that's okay. Don't ask questions though, like about where I might go with this. That'd be better to hold to the end, because otherwise it'll just get a little confusing for me. And actually, I can't find the chat, so I probably will just hold them to the end. So first of all, what does SAFe do well? Because it does a lot well. I mean, it wouldn't be where it is if it didn't do some things well. There's a lot of negative press out there, but I think it's a little bit unjustified. It first of all gets management to give development some time to improve. I mean, that's actually a good thing. You know, you have this implementation, they give support to it, the teams get to train, the product managers, product owners get to train. SAFe's got a nice way to get started. That's actually very helpful. It also plans across the entire program. And by that, you know, the development group, the agile release trains in the program, they're looking across that. This is very good because up until SAFe, actually, we had our own technology. The way I got into SAFe, maybe that's a little worth a little bit. It also gives a little history of where this is coming from. Back in 2011, I think it was, I flew out to Boulder to talk to Dean Leffingwell because at that time, there weren't that many successful Agile adoptions. I'm sure Jim Highsmith had some, Israel Gott had some, Net Objectives had a few, and Dean had a few. And, I'm talking like 10 or 12 large scale transformations had been done at that point. And Dean and my crew, I hadn't done them all. We had actually a lot of the work that's in Discipline Agile Flex now did not originally come from me, but came to other people who were who worked for me, and I've taken all that and consolidated it. So in well, anyway, we talked and it got clear that Dean's a lot better marketer than me. So it was like, well, let's not compete with each other. Let's just go together. And that's why I got involved with SAFE to do he knew I was very technical. So I showed them how we did ATDD and stuff like that and some other technical stuff and helped introduce Kanban into SAFE and a few other things that weren't there at the time and co-taught a fair amount of times to do that. But what happened is there are a couple of things we'll get into that I had tried to convince Dean to change and he never did. And eventually I just got like, well, there's a weak foundation here. And I don't know when it was, 4 or 5 years ago, I just decided to break off completely. But at the time, 2011, 2012, 2013, with the exception of a few individuals, and SAFE was the first to go past the teams. The Scrum is approach that Scrum was trying to do didn't work well. Guy Beaver, myself, and Jim Trott had written a book around this time called Lean Agile Software Development, Achieving Enterprise Agility. And what we talked about there, how to coordinate Scrum teams, actually became what Scrum as a product ownership is now. But basically expanded the idea. It's not just the team, and it's not just a couple of teams working together. This is actually very good. It created visibility across the program. It made dependencies visible. These are all good things. So you want to understand what's working about SAFE. It's odd. Normally they say, well, you got to find out what's like wrong to fix it. And I'm saying, no, actually, you want to find out what's working. And then you want to see what's not working. And then you want to see how to extend it. So in SAFE, there are a lot of things that are working. You do have this delivery pipeline. I mean, it could be better. You could make better than things than trains, but that's useful. You have teams working in common cadence with frequent synchronization. This is out of Flow 101 of Don Reinerson. DevOps. Well, now it's old school, but back in 2011, 2012, DevOps wasn't the big thing. This was nice. You've got shared services, need to be handled with Kanban. The program backlog to create the context for all of this. This was not a well-known concept until around 2009 when, Dean had written some stuff about it. I don't know if he'd written it by then because I remember going in the conference circuit, seeing Mary Poppendick present the concept of the product management, myself do it, Ken Powers of Cisco at the time, and Dean Stevens with Leading Agile, I think is their name in Atlanta. That's a great crew, by the way, of people. They're not affiliated with DA, but I like pointing out when people are really good. Leading Agile is a really good company. And not Dean, Dennis, sorry, Dean's his brother. Dennis Stevens. And all of us, it's kind of funny, we hadn't talked to each other, but all 4 of us in 1 or 2 conferences presented the same idea of why product management was so important. At the time, we were kind of vilified by a lot of people in the Scrum community. I remember saying, oh, you're putting one more person in front between the customer and the teams, but you kind of need to in large scale. There are reasons for that. So we had the product management role, the release train engineer, down at the bottom, lean's required at scale. SAFE's about 80% consistent with lean. It uses a lot of practices. It's got mostly consistency. It's not a perfect systems thinking type approach. But I may not get into that, but that's one shortcoming of it. But it at least talked about it a lot. It exposed a lot of things with it. Talking about leadership. Up until this point, leadership management had been somewhat vilified. The old chicken and pigs thing that Scrum finally stopped talking about, but it's still somewhat inherent in the conversation. You can't talk about something for 10 years, stop talking about it, and it goes away immediately. Quality technical practices, again, a good introduction. Not really the way I think works the best, but it's exposing all this stuff. This is all good stuff, and people hadn't been doing it. That you could use Scrum or XP or Kanban, and Safe Scrum is actually a little better in my mind than the Scrum Guide Scrum. So this is all good stuff. You know, you gotta give them credit when it is. You got to be focusing on effective teams and things. So this is good, but there's some stuff it doesn't deal with as well, even though it claims to and looks like it does. And that's what I want to get into here. That what we have is most organizations are set up hierarchically. You know, we have a CEO dealing with managing a few people, managing another few people. So we manage people kind of this top-down way, but what happens is our work cuts across the organization. This disconnect is the heart of our problem. And we need to recognize that that's what we have to deal with. We're managing incorrectly in a sense. Now, there are a variety of books, and I'll point to some at the end. Actually, I think I'm going to refer to 5 different books. Let's see if I can remember them all. One is Beyond Budgeting. Another one is Humanocracy, Age of Agile. I know Team of Teams. Maybe it's just 4 books, but for some reason I think it's 5. Anyway, we'll see at the end. But these are all books on how do you get to a better organizational structure than this, okay? So the thing to remember is, and this isn't quite the value stream because work might go up to managers for approval and things like that, but the value stream is actually the flow of work. This is one of the very interesting things about lean. Lean takes the focus off people to the workflow and the creation of value. And I want to be clear about one thing here, because this has been misinterpreted a lot. A lot of people interpret that as, oh, what do you mean? I'm focusing on the work, not the people. Oh, lean doesn't care about people. No, it's actually just the opposite if you stop to think about it a little bit. If you trust your people, if you know they're going to do good if you put them in a good environment, then you don't have to focus on them. You focus on the environment. Good people in a good environment, great work. Good people in a bad environment don't do so well. So lean focuses on the workflow, not the people, because it trusts the people. It's actually about education and things. But we have to ask who's managing this value from left to right. Most organizations don't have anybody doing this, by the way. They don't have it from the start of the customer till it gets back to the customer. This is why we call it the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant. It's a consultant to look at the value stream. Also, we talk about this as focusing on the work, because when we look at the people are always busy. They're always working, but just reflect for a moment. Think about yourself. If you're a not manager, think about yourself. If you're a developer, tester, product manager, product owner, if you are a manager, then think about some of their roles. What you'll notice is product managers, product owners, devs, testers, all these people, if you were to look at them, they are busy 24/7. That's a little exaggeration, but you know what I mean. More than 40 hours. They're busy. They're always busy. You could call them productive, but maybe not. Getting them busier doesn't do any good. But look at the work itself. An idea comes in. It sits on somebody's desk. It then goes into a meeting. Then it goes to somewhere else. Then maybe it finally gets into development, but now you have 3 teams that are working on 4 things. If you have a team working on 4 things at once, what's going to happen is the work is going to wait necessarily 75% of the time. The work of one idea, I mean. As one thing cuts across this bottom line, you're going to have 3 other things waiting. So that's what's called process cycle efficiency. How much of the time is it waiting? Or actually, how much time is you getting work done? This is our inherent problem. How do we handle this? Okay. So SAFe, by having programs, they unjam things a lot. And this is a good thing. You know, you create an agile release train. So basically, you at least have people coordinated because of the planning. So it doesn't wait as often because people know it's coming. You do quarterly planning. You know what? Quarterly planning is big batch, and a lot of people say it's way too much. But if you couldn't get anything out in a year, a quarter is pretty good. So it's again relative. Having teams work together in common cadence with frequent synchronization solves and identifies and solves problems. DevOps is good. There's, and this is kind of an interesting insight because I think about this kind of thing. So there's a partial shift in management. I've seen this. You get this in, and it's like, okay, good. And what they tend to do is they tend to, like the first program increment, usually the second one, then around the third or fourth, it starts tailoring off. But the first one or two or three, they give kind of what I'll call a little slack to the development group. Oh, we have this program backlog. We're going to let the developers pull from the program backlog what they're going to do over the next 3 months. This is actually a key piece. This is actually probably one of the most important things you can do in Agile is avoid overloading the development crew and using a pull system. So you like Scrum does, you get 2 weeks worth of work. If that's your sprint, you pull in 2 weeks, you could work at a pace with a little bit of pressure maybe, but you're not overwhelmed. You're much more productive. When you're multitasking, people think multitasking is the big problem. It isn't. Multitasking makes you less efficient. Multitasking makes you a little hyper and a little, how do I stay in this job perhaps? But multitasking in and of itself is an efficiency thing. What kills you more, and just think about this from your own experience, developers in particular, if I'm a developer and I write something and then I got to go to a bunch of stuff later, and then I find a week later that there was a bug in the first thing, I got to spend a new time. I'm not being inefficient. I've got new work to do. So these delays create additional work. So when working on 3 or 4 things, it's really a disaster. Where multitasking makes us inefficient, we're working on too many things, which makes the work kind of grow on us. So when management literally lets us pull the work, like, hey, the development teams pull 3 months of work and we're working at the right pace. And the next time we pull 3 months of work and we're working at the right pace. That's all good. But I'm going to go into the challenge. What happens after a while, that stops happening. Oh, well, we need this done. You guys are supposed to be good now. You got to get this done. And the push system, the pull system turns into a push system. And one of the really good things about SAFe goes away. Now you can blame people. Well, that's because they're not doing SAFe. I hear this with Scrum all the time. I kind of hate that. Just gotta take a deep breath. I got a little hyper there. The reason I hate that is because I'm what's called a systems thinker. I look at the whole system. You can't just look at a part of the system, like Scrum's a framework, SAFe's a framework. That's part of the system. You got to look at how does the framework fit into the company? How do the people interact with the framework? That's part of the system, that interaction between frameworks and the people. You can't just say, well, the people aren't doing it right, because that's your framework interacting with people that has them not do it right. See, this is something a lot of people don't understand about systems. Systems are not the components put together. Systems are about the relationships between the components put together. You look more at the relationships of how things are. I'll give you a real simple example. This comes from Russ Akoff. And if you Google, what if Russ Akoff gave a TED Talk? It's like the best 12 minutes. The guy's brilliant. It's the best 12 minutes on systems thinking. I don't think I really understood systems thinking until I read the Fifth Discipline. And that was not an easy read. So in 12 minutes, you can get the essence of it. And what Russ talks about is, imagine you got 50 cars and the 50 best cars, and you got the best parts of the best cars, and you took all those best parts of the best cars and you put them all together. And now you got the best parts of the best cars, and you have a pile of junk because the engine doesn't work right with the transmission, doesn't work right with the frame, doesn't work right with the brakes. So it's about the relationships between things. How do you see those relationships? So how management reacts, how people react, how the system reacts, how the framework reacts, this is all critical stuff. And when I hear people, I mean, Scrum is the worst. Sorry, I ran a little bit on them here. But Oh, well, they didn't use Scrum. Okay, but the question is, why didn't they use Scrum? What did the system have to do with it? Same thing with SAFe. What does the system have to do with it? Okay, so here are the challenges. So there's good stuff there. We want to know what the challenges are. Because I'm actually being clear, I should have said this actually. I'm not trying to tell anybody who's doing SAFe to get off SAFe and come to Discipline Agile. That would likely be a mistake. Why? Because you've already done some stuff in SAFe. You've probably made some headway in SAFe, and it'll probably, if you're not the CEO, somebody's going to ask you, why did you start with SAFe? So what I want to show you is now how we can identify what the challenges are and move forward and improve it. Now, at the end of it, you might not be doing SAFe anymore, but nobody will mind after you've made improvements. So we got to identify the challenges. This is what I've seen. First of all, you're starting at the program level. Now, I know you don't have to start at the program level, but most everybody does. You don't deal with the entire value stream, and I'll show that why that's a problem too. Management often thinks their job is done. This is part of systems thinking. Oh yeah, developers, yeah, we got them going. We're giving them stuff. They pull every 3 months. My job's done. Now they may not say that, but I see that over and over again. The focus on the customer has not really changed. Um, they're getting better with some things with the operational value streams. This was Alan Ward brought that to people's attention years and years ago. Unfortunately, died in a plane crash accident years ago. But the focus on the customer hasn't really changed much with SAFe, and we want some of that. And to be candid, their portfolio and product management is really complicated and not so effective. And I'm going to show you the reason for that. I'm not going to show you all the stuff you can do at portfolio and product management, but the reason is they have poorly designed artifacts. What artifacts do they use? They use epics, features, and stories. This is way old school. I'm going to introduce you to two other. Oh, I'm sorry. I know they use MVPs, but they actually use MVPs wrong, and I'll explain that. There's another artifact I will show you. It's a key component to improving SAFe, easy to put in, straightforward. We'll talk about that. Okay. There's another thing that I think you have to recognize. And I just joke a little bit of two-step like a dance. But if you're a really jammed company, I mean, you're jammed up, you don't get stuff done in a year. You could be massive, you can be 50 people, but if you're not getting stuff done, the standard way of fixing it is what I call a two-step. The first step is you organize into groups, say trains, teams, that at least can break down the silos of the group. They can collaborate with each other. They can see their dependencies. They can unjam it. So SAFe uses, agile release trains or arts, but arts are still too big for true agility. And most of the time they're bigger than what they need to align to business stakeholders. So what SAFe does is it gets you being able to manage the dependencies into these trains and programs. As step one, that's very good, but you're not going to keep improving if you stop there. And unfortunately, SAFe doesn't have any mechanism to it. I'm going to introduce something we call focused solution teams, which is how do you get a group? It's not like a Scrum team. I mean, if you can get everything done in a Scrum team, go for it. But a lot of applications really need 15, 20, 50 people or something. How do you get them organized well so they can be focused on achieving a solution? So I'm going to show you that as well. So these are two important things that are missing. One is the artifact. We're going to introduce that. It's called the minimum business increment. The other one is the focused solution team. And I'm going to also talk about why you have to look at value streams differently. And I know I'm going to introduce one other thing, but I guess I'll have to wait for the slides and just forget at the moment. Okay, so let's look at this again, SAFe. So we start out with essential SAFe, but yes, that's critical. Yes, there's this belief. By the way, I don't believe this belief. There's this belief in the Agile community that you get teams going and then you get them working together and then you go up. This is how SAFe does it. And I've been challenging this for, I think, since my first SAFe implementation. I didn't actually have that belief forever that I can remember, at least not since 2005. But when I did a safe implementation, and Dean was always talking about you got to get good Scrum teams, and then you scale Agile and all that, good Agile teams, and he was saying that all the time back then. And that's not what I did when I did my first safe implementation. Well, I didn't do completely what I would have liked. I was mostly at Essential Safe, but I did train the teams. But what also happened, I didn't train them well. I didn't have time to train the teams well. And we wanted to keep this thing under budget. So I trained them en masse. I did the worst Scrum training in my life in 2012 when I kicked off Northwestern Mutual. And some of it was because at that time, SAFE had really horrible Scrum materials. They've improved them. Their Scrum materials are really good now. But they, first of all, had bad Scrum materials. And plus, I don't know, I trained like 100, 125 people at once. It was my God, how do you train 100 people in Scrum at once? And you know what? I went out on a limb a little bit because my sense was all these people needed to know was that they were going to have to build software every 2 weeks. I didn't have to explain. I said the explanation was, well, we're doing safe and everybody has to fit into these increments. And I gave them a little bit on stories and stuff like that and some of the practices. And we even had some teams show up. I literally, in the program increment, a team of 12 people showed up and said, well, we want to join the program and train us and all that. And we trained them in the program increment. They had no Scrum training prior to this. I had one of my guys who was there talk to them and explain how they would fit. See, this is systems thinking. This is a lot of what Discipline Agile does, is how do teams work in a context? See, I'm not saying you go top down either. I'm not saying you go bottom up. You go within the value stream and expand it. So this idea, if you can train people by the context you're in, that makes a big difference. But this stuff up on top is very important. Epic owners and architects, the big view, how it goes into that. Most people try to retrofit. You're only getting part of the value stream. Everybody needs these. But what's difficult is, first of all, that top part's complicated, more so than it needs to be, because of, again, this lack of the artifact. And I'm going to show you how to use it. And you could retrofit it on top of safe, make it improvement alone. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, if you start at Essential Safe, it's difficult to get up to portfolio. Okay. And you kind of have to go all the way up. I'll show you at the end why that is. So this is like, we get this start, it works well. And I hate to say this, Safe's excellent, it's SAI. They go out and they do, after 6 months, while everything is chugging along, that's when they do all their case studies. So that's why you see all these great case studies with safe teams going, because they catch them at that level, but then they stagnate and fall back. I've known companies trying safe 3, 4, 5 times, and it keeps failing or starting and stagnating. I think that entices them because of what I'm about to show you. Okay, so these are the 4 main enhancements. That's right, it's 3 main things. Now, there's a lot more to Discipline Agile, the more to the Discipline Agile Flex system than these 4 things. But in fact, I'm actually going to show you 3 things. I'm going to show you safe from the value stream, MBIs, focused solution teams. I'm going to show you a couple other things like borrowed team member and things like that. But we're based on theories of flow, lean, theory constraints, organizational development, and human behavior, because people are involved, okay? You need to know how people are going to react to this. You need to have a system to coach them in it. This is all important. So what we have then is, I'm going to go through each of these three things as we go. Okay. So the value stream always starts with a customer and ends with a customer. Okay. The systems thinking perspective, because you can see this thing goes to that thing goes to that thing. If I'm handling something from the product owners and they're building the program increment, then I can see the relationship in the flow. This is something that we do a different approach than safe. Then I think it's important. I think it's better to take a few full value streams, get them to work, than it is to get part of all the value streams, which is what SAFE does. SAFE works on all of the value streams that run through the program, but they don't deal with all. I got to be real careful. I say this, I'm using all twice, 2 different words. Okay. SAFE will take all of the value streams that are that run through the program at one time, but they're not using the entire value stream. That's good. So they'll get all of the value streams running through the program, but only part of each value stream because they don't have the portfolio management there. It's better to take the whole thing. Okay. So value streams are again about the flow, not the work, not the people doing the work. This will come to be important. So from a value stream perspective, you can look at this, let's say, and you should. See, if you look at this big picture, it's kind of neat because you see all the things that are going in there. You see all the people that are involved, all the actions that are involved. But how do they work together? Take a moment and imagine how these all work together. Where does the work start? Well, it should start from the customer, because that's what we talked about. So, you can start thinking it goes from the customer to the business owner, and that they're going to be looking at what themes do we use based on the customers. And then it kind of goes around up here and then comes to our planning and then goes through development teams and then comes back. So the problem is you have to imagine yourself where the value stream is and say, not a lot of people do that. This is not obvious that people do that. And this is a little bit of a problem. So when I go into say, well, I don't now because I'm at the PMI. My job now is to build curriculum like this and to work with DA consultants, which I like to do, but I'm not actually going into clients. Although I do work with a few remotely, just kind of a pro bono, so I learn and help some of our consultants. But it's hard to see. So what I did is ways back, I redrew SAFE. Go up to the top, you got the customer, strategic themes, you have these roles, the backlogs you go down to the right, and I don't have the arrow, but imagine an arrow going from the bottom right back up to the customers. You can see the relationships here. And you can also start seeing that the essential SAFE is only dealing with this bottom part of the value stream. Okay. So what we want to look at first, why do we view this? Why look at it from a value stream perspective? Okay. Again, systems are about the relationships between their components. I can see it a little better here. I can see how the work flows and who it hands off to. It's a cleaner way of looking. They're not just the components, it's how they relate to it. So this is one thing value stream is good. Now there's another thing to know about a value stream. Usually upstream in the value stream, some people call it the value network, by the way, and that's perfectly fine. Upstream stuff has a greater effect downstream. If I have two big blocks and they go into the development, or I have too much work, this is one of the things Pull does. Pull tends to decouple things. So even if I'm overloading teams, I might do not so much. They may avoid being overloaded. Okay. We want to start thinking in terms of flow. How does work go from the customers through the system and back up? So we're giving our mind a way to look at the right problem right now. Okay, so that's what we want to do. It's less disruptive. Also, notice that I can inch upwards if I can. I can see what's going on. I can also look at value streams, a few select value streams running through. Okay. So I'm just going to put, these are the things I showed you before. This is the good stuff. Just wanted you to see where it is. Okay. Oops, 1, 2, 5. So the good stuff in SAFE, which I'm now overlaying on top of the value stream perspective that I talked about, notice where most of it is. It's most of it at the essential SAFE level, which was noticeable before as well. This is kind of part of the issue. The reason is even small orgs need portfolio backlog. They also need a solutions backlog. They're using MVPs. You got to think about this for a second. So MVPs have an interesting history because they're now, I think, in their third morphing. I'll talk about this in a couple of minutes more in detail. But since I have this here, I'll show this. Minimum viable products, as SAFE describes them, uses Eric Ries's MVPs, from the Lean Startup, which is brilliant, by the way. The only thing I dislike about Eric Ries is he's better looking than me and he talks better than I do. Well, other than that, he's a nice guy. That's just a funny compliment. Guy's brilliant. I mean, Lean Startup is amazing. And his latter book, I can't remember the title off the top of my head, is equally brilliant. But MVPs, as they're defined in the Lean Startup and as they're defined kind of in SAFE, are about new products. And when you put them into a big system, funny things happen. I'll talk more about this later, but that's actually a bit of a problem. That what's the smallest increment of value for existing products? In other words, if I'm doing an MVP, I usually have a small team building it because we're experimenting with a new product. What if I've got this enhancement that's going to affect 10 different teams? MVPs don't talk about that. In fact, that's almost the antithesis of what it is. So something's wrong with this. I'm going to show you how to fix it, so don't worry. Also, the way you sequence on epics, you can't really do weighted shortest job first on features. You can't do them on epics. And yet that's what's happening. Why can't you do them on it? Well, they do it, SAFe does it, but think about it. Weighted shortest job first is about how do I get value out the door quickly? What part can I deliver first? Well, you don't deliver all the epic, you deliver a part of the epic. So if you do weighted shortest job first on an epic, you're not doing weighted shortest job first on what you're putting out the door. What about features? Well, features, if you deliver them to the customer, you can do weighted shortest job first. But if you don't, then there is no value. You know, if you're developing a DVD player and one of the features is fast forward, there's no value there unless you also have stop, reverse, and all that. So this is why it's complex up at the top, is because he's missing a key point, misusing the MVPs. And I'm going to get into this in gory detail, trust me, because this is actually very important. So what happens in the program increment, there's a lot of time spent on truly prioritizing to the PI as people break it down. There's a lot of decomposition. I've seen this virtually every PI I've seen and people I've talked to. This is what happens. It shouldn't happen. It should be done up front. The solution to this is use minimum business increments. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes on that. You need to reorganize your RTEs, not your RTEs, your ARTs, Agile Release Trains, to what we call focused solution teams. And we're going to use theories of flow, lean, TLC to continue to improve. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to take a value stream view. Basically, that'll enable us to talk to each other, communicate, have our work be visible so we can see how it's flowing. We're going to start where it's appropriate, okay? Starting at the program level is not always the best place to start. In fact, I'd say it usually isn't the best place to start. In my opinion, it's your last choice place to start, but sometimes that's where you have to start. When we do DA Flex, part of the playbook we use there to start is to look to see who is guiding this. If it's the CEO, we'll start the whole organization. If it's IT, then we're limited to the program. If it's product managers, we can start halfway up the value stream, okay? We want to improve product management. MVPs are insufficient. As I've mentioned, I'll talk about MBIs. We want to reorganize the teams. There's some really good work being done in the last 5 years on reorganizing teams. Team Topologies is a great book. Dynamic reteaming, organizing for complexity. Jeff Anderson has a good one. I don't know if it's published. It's published. I don't know if it's done. He keeps massaging it. But Jeff Anderson has a good thing about agile organization. We've not written ours up. It's in the materials.
What is MBI?
I'm going to get to it. Minimum business increment. I haven't described it yet, but I will get there. Okay. So an MBI in a nutshell is what's the smallest value you can deliver to an existing system that will enhance it. So we're going to improve it by teaching you something new. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes on that. And you also want to have continuous improvement, not have these 2 to 3 month learning cycles. You need to have them more continuously. So there are 4 phases. First, we're going to improve in place. Do what you're doing, do it better, don't have to reorganize. Then we're going to restructure the teams to have shorter planning cycles. Not all teams in a 3-month planning session need to be operating in 3 months. Then we want to align business stakeholders, implement beyond budgeting or agile budgeting, basically get smaller than trains. And then finally, how do you keep going? Okay. I call them phases, but they can be done in parallel. They don't have to be done in sequence. Okay, minimum business increments. We're going to get to this right now. They're an essential artifact I have seen companies, and I've used them myself, turn their whole product management around with this one concept. I'm going to go through it here. I want to point out that MVP has gone through now 3 different definitions. It has started with Frank Robinson, not the baseball player, in 2001. And an MVP was basically the minimum viable product you could release. It was not being used as I'm discovering a new product. Eric Ries redefined it in his Lean Startup. And most people, I didn't even know that Robinson had done 2001. Okay, the MVP is the smallest piece of work to be used to validate an hypothesis about a potential product geared towards startups or innovation inside a big company. It's the first time a product service is released, or it can be ongoingly as you improve it, but continuously expand it, but it's still usually done by a small team. Okay, they can pivot. See, if you think about it, why would I put an MVP into a 3-month planning event? I mean, really, just think about that. I know this sounds harsh when I say it this way, but it's worth thinking about because that's what we're being told to do. But what happens is everybody knows that's insane. That's not what we're building. Large companies do not build all new products. So the MVP term is being used when we have innovation and when we're extending existing ones. This is confusing. And what happens is the term MVP has lost virtually all meaning through this misuse. So there is value in that MVP. Those first 4 lines, great. That's how it should be used. Let's just stick with Eric Ries's definition. Sorry, Frank, you've been usurped. But what if you're an established company? It's an enhancement and multiple teams are required. You get these are 2 different things. And when you misuse one, you cause a problem. So first of all, stop using the MVP. It's misused unsafe, plain and simple. Okay. So let's get into what is an MBI. And I'm going to compare these to a lot. And I'll tell you why I'm going to compare these to a lot. You can throw an MBI into any safe application, implementation, get massive improvement, even if that's the only thing you do. And that will drive all the other things. And I know companies, I remember one company I went to, it's a huge, huge company, but it was like a 300-person division. And I went in there with one of my buddies, one of my associates at Net Objectives, and we did like, I don't know, it was a 4-day product management. It was agile product management training. And the main guy who was there brought us in, basically took the concept of the MBI, he transformed his entire 300-person group from it. Because I didn't help him later, but we got to be friends and I would ask him. So it's a very important concept here. The purpose of an MBI is not doing less, which sometimes executives will hear. It's about how do you deliver value sooner? In other words, if I've got a year project, what can I deliver in a month? What can I deliver in 3 months? How do I define what that is? You get stakeholders on the discovery of business, where, we call it the business side, basically. Decompose business strategies and initiatives to create MBIs. I might have a year-long initiative, but can I get a sequence of MBIs that'll come out the door? Value is defined not so much by the customer, but from the customer's perspective, but within the context of the business. So to create MBIs, you need to ask some questions. What's our product, services? What added value do we have? Will it be sufficient to warrant being released by itself? It has to be releasable. I don't mean releasable with switches that have turned it off. I mean releasable, consumed by the customer. Focus on the business value of the customer as well as value to the business. Does it make sense? Can it be completed? You want it to, well, how quickly it can be completed is really not up to you. It's the smallest chunk that can be completed that makes sense. Some MBIs you can do in a week. Some MBIs take months. Depends how complex they are, how many different things they are. An MBI also, we think of it as a container. What needs to happen and who? So it's this chunk of it's a definition of the value, who needs to do it, what they need to do to get it done, not from a design point of view. And we use MBIs as an artifact. This is what we do our weighted shortest job first on. This is what we plan. Okay. Now this is actually, we're in the process of making some of these slides. And the intention was that it's a sequence of things, each one of those moves being an MBI. But actually, that's a bad picture. I meant to kind of block it out. We're going to put somebody skiing. See, MBIs enable you got a year-long program. You can do something for a couple of months. You can then pivot. You can put it out in the field and say, oh, here's what happened. Let's pivot. So you can continuously adjust as you go. okay? So let's look at the difference between MBIs and MVPs, because I just really want to make this clear, okay? We use MBIs for changing or enhancing existing products. MVPs are developing new ones. They're different in 4 categories: investment, development team needs, building method, and customer interaction. From an investment, MBIs are about investing or enhancing existing products or service. You expect to get money back. MVPs are investing in discovering whether a new product or service is going to be valuable. Those are 2 different things. Hey, we want to spend some money to see if doing, mobile handheld banking is a good idea if it had never been done. Or now that we have a mobile handheld banking system, we want to enhance it. Those are 2 different things. Who will do the work? One team, like on the right, a focused solution team. These guys are pretty much independent, or do we need several teams that are involved? What about how to go about the work? Well, with an MBI, it's really big. I got to split it across all the teams. Basically, with a minimum viable product, I can start with a few features and add to it. MBI is this big thing. I've got this initiative. I got to break it down into small pieces. These are different things. What about customer interaction? Well, with MBIs, I've got an existing customer base. So I talk to them, I get things improved. With an MVP, I probably take a few focused ones, work with them. See how these 4 things are different? I mean, these are really different things. And if you don't have the concept of what's happening and I'm in a large company and it's going all over I've got these big chunks, you're going to have problems. So you want to work with them differently. Now, eventually an MVP might turn into an MBI, but you actually like to defer that in a sense. Small companies start out where they have people who know what they're doing and they might keep products along as MVPs forever. They just have a small team building it, making it better. But at some point, once it gets out into the world, you might say, or the wilderness of the organization's development, it's become an MBI, okay? Even when you use MBIs, you want to have a focused solution. I know I haven't talked about that yet. I'll get to it. A team that can work on it. I'll get to that real soon. Okay, why use MBIs? MBIs are also, notice, the business will discover what they are, define them, and then give them to the development team. What this means is the development team is given a full chunk and definition of value. This is what we need to build. If it gets scattered to all our groups, at least we know what we need to build. So you can coordinate. In other words, if an MBI gets built across several different teams, I know what I need to get out the door together. They enable us to focus and align on value. Okay? MBIs connect business and the business and discovery activities with the development and implementation activities. Remember, I talked about a relationship? In other words, the business talks to development by handing off, these are the things we want you to build. They've got value. I need the whole thing, not just some of it. And it accelerates. You make this promise across the organization. I'm not going to go into it here, but Discipline Agile has, I don't know if it's 6 or 7, I think it's 7 promises we suggest people make, like focus on the customer. One of them is also this one: accelerate value realization by focusing on MBIs. So our focus becomes on what can be delivered to the customer, not what are the stories the team does, not what's the epic we're pulling it from. The customer focus. This chunk of work is what we want to focus on. And what we have here is we have like strategies, initiatives. Notice MBIs are in the business side, and MBIs are also in the implementation side. MBIs are what we use in our intake process. Like the SAFE's got the program backlog. That's what you load with. You load that up with MBIs. You don't load it up with features that are disjointed and may or may not work together. You don't load it up with epics. You got to pull the features out of it. You load it up with the stuff you want to build that will enable fast delivery. I think that's pretty clear. If it's not, ask a question at the break. I'm running just a hair behind, but I think I'm catching up. So I'm not too far behind. We'll have time for questions. So portfolio management is what we use to get to MBIs. Product management or portfolio management is the strategies and initiatives. Product management, we get MBIs, and that's how we hand things on. Okay. So smaller pieces go through the door faster. That's basically it. We want to get focus as we move forward. We get accountability because we say, hey, here's what we're doing. Did it get us value? Did it not get us value? These are all important things. Oops, sorry. How do you create these? Okay, so big batch, this is the old waterfall. Maybe you got a database server. So this is how systems used to be built. Hopefully they're not being built this way. Um, if you're doing Scrum and building them in layers, that could be called Scrum or Fall. But you don't really want to build, you get very little value out the door until the end. What we're talking about is incremental values, end to end to the customer that you can deliver, another end to end to the customer you can deliver. Now notice you also have the option after you do a few MBIs, well, maybe I'm not getting enough value. So you can stop, or you might just keep going, okay? So it's hard though when you build whole thing. This of course is how SAFe does it as well. They're saying build slices, build pieces. But what I'm saying is what you want to make sure is that each one of these that you build is an MBI. This is the next MBI. This is the next MBI. That's how you go. Okay. Back to our value stream. Okay, remember, I know the MBI is big. I'm not doing that on every phase. I'm going to go through the rest real fast. But notice if you use MBIs up here, we have all this other stuff, solution architecture. We have all these things about how trains work together. You have to do that because you're dealing with epics and initiatives. When you've got an MBI, the MBI itself tells you what its value, who's going to work on it, how it needs to be coordinated. It's a very simple way of handling all those issues that without the artifact takes a lot of effort. Proper design can go a long way toward making things simple to use. The word simple is so misused in the Agile space, and it's been so misused in the Agile space since XP came out. Now, I love XP. I love XP. The problem with XP is what a buddy of mine, actually coworker now, Jim Trott, he would call it the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge is you say things that to you and to somebody who's as smart as you will understand, but it's totally misinterpreted by somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience. Simple is one of those words. So when Kent Beck in XP, one of the co-creators of XP, said, all other things considered, do as simple as possible. People, oh, we got to get simple and all that. They forgot the all other things. The all other things was that it's understandable. He said fewest number of classes. No, but after all other things, like it's understandable, like it's maintainable. Don't go too far. But he knew that, like he knows how to breathe. He doesn't tell people to breathe. You're all breathing, right? I didn't tell you to breathe. You knew how to breathe. So that background wasn't there for everybody. I mean, just take a look at who they had. Ward Cunningham, Kent Beck, Ron Jeffries, Chad Hendrickson. I don't think there's ever been a group like that before or since. So when they say things that they're telling themselves, if you're a mere mortal like me, you've got to really think about it. You know what I mean? And simple, this simple to understand, but difficult to master. Well, so is a unicycle. I happen to be, by the way, at one time was the #1 unipolo player in the world. There weren't that many unipolo players, so that may not be that big of a thing. But we used to play polo on unicycles. Really simple to understand, really difficult to master, and dangerous, I might say, because we didn't wear helmets. But anyway, that's a long time ago. So what we want to do is use MBIs also how we sequence things, get things in order, use WSGIF on it, because WSGIF, as I mentioned on epics and features, doesn't make any sense. So now you've got another complication. You're trying to talk to product managers and product owners, and they know something's wrong. You're telling me, look at this whole thing, look at this other whole thing as epic, but I'm only going to deliver some of this, not some of that. It's apples and oranges. Doesn't make sense. So people get that. So we want to get focused. Now, here's the other thing you can do, again, if you're using MBIs. So this should look like a program increment backlog. What you want to do is actually try to get these MBIs to the left. Now, I know you can do this. I know nothing tells you in SAFe not to do this, but the developers are having to figure this out on the fly. If you've ever been to a program increment, well, actually, they're different now because they're virtual, but they're usually pretty hectic. And what we want to do is get MBIs out the door. In other words, you want to plan to your releases, not just release when you get to it. That should say release for a team. I pulled an old slide that says reason for a team. Okay, so that's the second thing. Use MBIs, then do ISJFUN. Then prior to the PIs, adjust teams as you can. One of the things that was neglected in the write-up of the Northwestern Mutual case study that they did, I wrote my own because I actually, they wrote it as if I had followed the rules. Actually, I didn't do the case study the normal way. I took more time getting prepped. I also rearranged the development group to some extent. It was kind of easy to see that a couple people should be rearranged into closer cross-functional teams. So do that. I had shared services as what we call professional service providers. In other words, if I had a shared service team of 10 people and they were committing to 20% of their capacity to another team, we'd look to see, hey, could you just have 2 people commit? In other words, not do these as handoffs, but have 2 people on shared services work as if they were team members. We call that borrow team member. So there are a lot of little things where you can improve the structure of the organization. Okay, actually there was that in the middle. It just came up. Then what we do is we improve cross-functionality. How can I make my teams better? I remember we had a really big room in the cafeteria, and we put all the teams that actually did the work, and then there were a lot of people who did support work, and we looked at, are you support people always supporting that team? And the answer was yes. So, well, just go over and be with that team. And we could rearrange it a little bit. By the way, Heidi Helfung has got a great book called Dynamic Reteaming. She writes it really clear and goes deeper. You know, it's a few years after us. She's not copying anything from us. She's really brilliant with her own work. She came up solving this problem in a different way with growing organizations and saw how teams have to change. This idea of totally stable teams is nonsensical. It's an extreme reaction from project teams being rearranged all the time. Well, that's bad too. But going to the opposite doesn't necessarily mean it's an improvement. So you have to be careful about that. Okay, so what I'm laying out here, I'm just going to back up for a second. So I did MBIs, you improved the BI planning, you shared services. These are each actions you could take through. This is like I say, it's a playbook. It tells you do this, do this, do this, do this. Your phase 1 was improve in place, which is what I'm still in. You can do these basically still doing safe. Improve cross functionality, sorry, I'll get that slide second. Adopt A to D and B to D. But I want to say when you rearrange things, there's some things you have to pay attention to, okay? So this is Conway's Law. Organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. This is important. If you really want to get into this, team topologies goes into it in a big way. The idea is this: if you basically think of it this way, if I've got 3 component teams building something and they're siloed and they're working together and they're communicating with each other, you can be sure that the APIs for those 3 groups are going to be based on that I do all this team does all that, that team does all that, and that's how they communicate. Now, an example of this, actually, of all places, I just found this out, one of my guys told me this. Elon Musk talked about organizational structure errors manifest themselves in the product. In other words, if you don't have your people organized right, you're going to have products that don't work well. He talked about, I think it was something like the brake, the wheel well or something. The way the people were, they weren't collaborating because they were in separate teams. The teams should have been something that built the entire wheel well. Now, the other thing is this. In Agile, we're talking about changing structures. So I came up with what I call the corollary to Conway's Law. Okay. And it's when you change organizational structure, your current application architecture, the way things talk to each other is going to work against your development teams. I call this Shalloway's corollary to Conway's Law. Because I saw this for a long time. I saw this time after time. People would reorganize and then they would have to start branching because people, it used to be these 30 people worked together in one team and now those 30 people were scattered across teams. And they all thought something was wrong. Well, maybe so, but it's inherent, so it's good to know that. So let's talk about focus solutions. A single cross-functional team may be too small to work on an MBI or an MVP, even for that matter. Find the people necessary to do the work. So feature teams is a concept that people pretty much know. They're going to build features. So it might need to build something, have multiple feature teams. A core team is a concept. I don't know if we came up with it, but we started doing this back in 2005. And Alan Shalloway, our president at the time, came up with it. I'd never heard the term before, so I'll claim it. I mean, for him. But a core team was, I almost have a cross-functional team, but not the whole team. I might have some people with special skills or experience that are outside. I use Kanban to manage that. But this whole group of people is cross-functional for this MBI or cross-functional for this MVP. Now, would it be good if they can be, could I get it down to 8 people, 2 pizza team? Maybe. But you know what? Sometimes you want 20, 30 people working on something so you can get it out the door faster. But you don't want them being bothered by other people. So this is what we call a focused solution team. They're focusing on one thing, basically. And it works because the same way Scrum works. You have fewer handoffs. You've got everybody striving for the same thing. You have fewer dependencies because you've organized the features and the core teams appropriately. And what you do is you basically, to build this, you identify the skill sets and capacities you need. This is some conversation I always have with people. Okay, we got this new thing out the door. What are we going to do? Do we have the people who can do it? Yeah, we see who's available. We also create these. We also want to make sure that pulling these people out doesn't adversely help others. Doesn't adversely hurt others. I've seen companies, I noticed you have to do this from going into companies where they had pilots of Scrum teams that were vastly successful. Wow, that Scrum team, that's amazing. We're going to use that. And then they did another one, and then they did another one. And what they didn't notice was that they were coordinating Scrum teams that were cross-functional, but they were making those people on the Scrum teams unavailable to the rest of the group. And sometimes they put special skills there. So they were improving Scrum teams, but they were actually hurting the organization. And at some point, you had 3 teams, maybe of 30, 40 people, and then you had another 60 to 100 people that don't have the skills they need anymore. And there gets to be this revolt, and everybody hates the Scrum teams anyway. It's not their fault. It's just that they're in a lucky situation. So when you do pilots, you have to be careful. You're piloting not the team, you're piloting the whole thing. So when you build this, you make sure you don't take people out that are absolutely essential elsewhere. I mean, they might be useful elsewhere, but you want to make it so they don't get interfered with much. It's not like they won't be available, but you don't want them interfered much. Okay. So they want to be as cross-functional as possible. So that's a focused solution team. Now there's another simple pattern. I mean, we got about a half a dozen of these. Team topology's got a bunch, dynamic reteaming's got a bunch. I'm just giving you a couple that are quite useful that you can use instantly. So borrow team member is when your current state is you've got basically I've got a team, the team in the purple, with the black color there, and they're interacting with another team, but only like 20%. So it's like, that those 8 teams, maybe 2 of those people basically get used. Well, borrow team member may be, well, in this case, maybe only say 1 of them, 15%. Excuse me, a borrow team member would be you loan this person to the other team. They still report to the manager on the green team. They actually still have to do the daily stand-ups of the green team and the purple team. And by the way, expect them to hate that, because that's what Playbook has. I got to go to 2 stand-ups? And the answer is yes. You have to go to the stand-up of the purple team because you're now on that team working with them. So you have a cross-functional team up there. But you better keep going to the stand-up of the team you're at, because you don't want to change things that'll hurt them. By the way, when they complain, that's an example of local optimism. They're just looking at themselves instead of how does it improve. So this is another little thing, borrow team member. So these kind of improve in place, adding AT to D, this stuff you can just lay on top of an existing safe implementation with virtually no changing except add these things to it. It's really good. We're going to quickly go through the rest of the things. So you can restructure teams. You can also say, if I've got a train, maybe part of the train could be operating not at 3-month increments, but monthly increments. Not everybody has to go at the same pace. These are the promises. I'm not going to go through them, but these are the DA promises: create psychological safety, accelerate value realization, collaborate proactively. Yeah, so there's 7. Stop for a second and think about this. This to me is one of the most inane things about Agile. Agile is about collaboration. Agile is about working together. Agile is how we can be a bigger team and working together. And you know what? Think about the promises. Most of the frameworks have you make. They don't tell you to make promises with the people you're working with. They tell you to make promises about doing the framework, which is insane to me. I mean, sorry, I know I'm a little bit on a roll here, but it's like when I really look and compare these things, it's like, oh my God, we want you to agree with each other. You're going to improve continuously. You're going to keep workloads within capacity because we know that works better. We want better predictability because we know we can collaborate better this way. How do we work together? Our focus is on our work, not on the frameworks. Okay. Focus solution team. So I usually don't put, I won't say usually, that'd be wrong. I've got focus solution teams in phase 2, but I always look for them. So in phase 1, if I could pull out a focus solution team, I'll do it because now I got this team settled. They're doing great. They're driven from management or the business management. But you can't always do it in phase 1. Okay, so I should have 7 could be in phase 1 or phase 2. It's again, like I said, these can go in parallel. Ultimately, I want to decompose my agile release trains into focus solution teams, smaller pieces, and then I can organize my products and start agile budgeting. This is the project to product mentality. I've got business stakeholders directly driving teams. And I don't have time to go into agile budgeting. We call it agile budgeting and lean allocation. It's you budget on a quarterly basis for an area and you allocate to the actual projects, managing your OPEX and CAPEX. Right now, we only have how to do this within our DAVSC workshop, but we'll be writing up some stuff on this. I don't even think it's anything new. It comes a lot out of Beyond Budgeting, which has been around for over, 12, 13 years. But we've made it a little more explicit and a little simpler and express it in a way that managers don't think you're crazy to do away with budgeting completely. So I'm not saying we're better than Beyond Budgeting. They're better than us. But we give you a way that you can do it in a pragmatic way. That's what we're trying to do. How do we, if you can go beyond us and do Beyond Budgeting, go for it. But we give you something that most managers will listen to and think is practical. Okay, and then there are other things you can do, just ongoing. The cool thing about Disciplined Agile is by showing you how to make these decisions to start and change, that also you use those same ideas to continuously improve. And that I think is pretty cool. So this is like just throwing in all these things we've done. There are improvements we do across the board when it's all done. That's all this was, just kind of a summary. A lot of stuff, but it can be done in different phases. Okay, almost done. We'll have some time for questions, which is good. Okay, I mentioned there were 5 books. Yeah, project to product. How did I forget Mick Kirsten? Sorry, Mick. Okay, so all 5 of these books I highly recommend. Now, if you're in SAFE, one book that may look like it's missing is Accelerate by Cotter. And it's funny because I saw that they use that, and there's some things about Cotter. I mean, he's got a lot of good ideas, but he's never been one of the people I really like a lot with transition management. Transition management, the best, simplest book I've seen yet still is William Bridges' Managing Transitions. But the thing about Cotter is this dual operating system creates the wrong mentality. And so we decided to just go, at first we thought, well, we'll use Age Agile. It's got kind of the same idea. You have semi-autonomous teams, you've got business supporting them. But the difference between the two is it's not that I have teams for efficiency and speed, or rather effectiveness and speed, and I have the business being efficient, reducing it. It's Age of Agile says, no, it's all about the customer, autonomous teams, business backs you up. So you do have the business backing up, but the mentality, the mindset's a bit different. So we like that better. Now, Beyond Budgeting, this has been around a while. This isn't, Bjorn Bortles, it was the main leader of it. So this must be another one of their books, secondary book. But you can go to any website, not any website, go Google, find Beyond Budgeting, a lot of good stuff. It's really about dynamically, figuring out what you need. This is a great book. I admit I haven't read it all, but Tom Guild, who's one of my heroes, anything by Tom Guild is really good, by the way, predates Agile with his Evo system. Um, Managing, no, crap, what's the name of his book? Anyway, his latest book is really good. I've been reading that, and I've been talking to Tom. He's a great guy. Humanocracy is really about creating organizations without bureaucracy. That's the play on words he's got. And he talks about micro enterprises, and he goes through a couple of cases where you actually have huge companies built up of kind of small, independent but working together type of companies. And the reason I like Humanocracy, it actually gives you a way to get there. A lot of these other books kind of talk about it, but they don't really tell you how to get there. Well, that's good, but how do I get there? So he tells you how to get there. So I like Humanocracy for that. Age of Agile is kind of what can I say? What's a book with two split personalities? The first half of the book, 2/3 of the book is brilliant about Agile. And then the rest of it's brilliant too, but I'm just going to warn you. It's actually about the way US companies really bastardize the whole capitalism approach, and buyback stock is bad. And so it gets to be a little political, although I agreed with everything you said. Not political like Democratic or Republican, but political is how you should be managing organizations for the benefit of customers, not to just make a profit. But that was really heavy, good reading though. And then Mick Kirsten's book, he's with Tax Cop. They've got a great bunch of people there. I know quite a few of them. But it's how do you go from a project mentality of single startups, projects to a long-term, how do I support things? Team of Teams is a brilliant book. And I read it. I still remember this. When I was reading it, I was thinking that, this is going to be another one of those teams get to figure out what to do. And that's not what it's about at all. It's about how do you set up an information structure that enables teams to get their job done. And he's talking about the Army, of course. All 5 of these are very consistent with each other. And it's why I really think they're all must reads, because they give you beyond budgeting, how do you do allocation of funding in a dynamic way, Humanocracy, how do you decouple an organization, Age of Agile, how do you focus on the customer, project to product, how do you keep products alive over a long period of time, and Team of Teams, how do you enable teams to do well by coordinating them with information. One last point, because this is again the elephant in the room with SAFe. They talk about going to SAFe, essential SAFe, then you can go to large solution, or you go to portfolio and go to full SAFe. The problem is large solution SAFe and portfolio SAFe are not quite the same thing. And most organizations at times need large solution, and sometimes they need portfolio. So you really can't be flipping back and forth between these two things. So you end up really having the choice of essential SAFe or full SAFe. Okay, that's how you get a hold of me. DA Flex. By the way, the DA Flex playbook is not in the DA Flex course. It's an add-on thing that we have. We have a kind of a support system. But if you go through the DA Flex system, the value stream system, then you'll actually be able to follow this a lot better. So anyway, wow, I am 3 minutes early. I'd planned to be done at 5:15 for 15 minutes questions. So how do you want to do the questions? We hadn't talked about that. I'm open for questions now for 18 minutes. Does somebody talk or put it in the chat box? I can't find the chat, unfortunately.
I'll probably encourage the audience to ask your questions directly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'd be great.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Sure.
Okay. So Al, so what are your thoughts? I know there's a lot of conversation in the community about like feature teams.
Yeah.
And so what I find is like in, large organizations, ultimately, a lot of times it takes so many different like skills and capabilities to kind of like develop something. And so like, what's your thought on actually kind of how to create feature teams in environments where it actually requires, 20, 30 different skill sets, right? To actually like, your words, right? Even kind of release a minimum business increment.
Okay, so if you're a really large organization, so there are two ways to go about this, and you don't actually ever get perfect. Okay, I mean, I know I talked about focus solution teams and things
Yeah.
like that, but that's ideal. That's what you're shooting for, and I acknowledge that getting there can be a little difficult. I'll give you one example of where it can be difficult. If you've ever been in manufacturing, manufacturing supply chain IT, for example, and we've all had it sometimes. If you bought anything, you've been involved in MS IT. So in manufacturing supply chain IT, what you're going to have is applications like manage my inventory, manage my customer information, but you're also going to have things like I'm buying something, I'm selling something, I'm returning something, I'm shipping something. So you very often have to have multiple groups where an MBI is going to cut across multiple groups. So I'm going to hold that for a second and say, this is where feature teams, though, can be useful, is at least a feature team, you can get a chunk of it out there and done. Okay, so feature teams are really good. I mean, if you can't get a cross-functional team that does all of it, then breaking it into feature teams is better, because at least you can get something done, built, deployed, you can validate it, even if you have to hold a few features until they get released, you can validate the feature. So there's a guide to look at here, which is what I'll just call unvalidated work, the amount of unvalidated work you have in your queue. So think about this. If I've got to have 10 or 15 feature teams to build different things, how much of the work that's in play have I validated with feedback, I've integrated, I've tested it? So what you want to start thinking about is the way to solve these problems is quick feedback on integration. And what the way to do that is, of course, you're breaking your structure up into smaller teams, like a feature team. Now, notice that if I do an MBI, if I've got a 4-month epic and I break it into 1-month MBIs, notice how the problem gets easier because I have less work going on at a time. But notice this other thing. If I get an MBI and have to split it across the teams, so even if I have to, and I know I haven't directly answered your question yet about the skill set, I'll get there. I'm just trying to show you there's a variety of different things. This is why this slide is so important. We're trying to look at the MBIs. We're trying to compress the things because they compress the time, like compress the time from going from here to here. We don't really like that it's 6 weeks. You want to compress these times from when you start till you get it done, because the longer those times are out there, that waste is done. So let's go to the skill set section. Why is that the case? And I'm not one of these believers in everybody's cross-functional T-shaped people and all that. That's great, but a lot of times you have specialists, and getting cross-functional teams, a lot of times you can't get to. I mean, this idea that everybody can be cross-functional. Actually, the very first Scrum team I worked on was in a situation where that was impossible. They had something like 10 metallurgists for 1,000 people doing hardware design, and you didn't need more than 10. So what you have is, what you want to do is start looking at these things I mentioned. But when people who have special skills can't fit on all the teams they need to be, use Kanban. This is not a hybrid like I'm doing half Kanban, half. I didn't make this clear. I know, I basically have given you a huge amount of information in almost no time. But think of a guy here with special skills, or a woman who's got a special experience here. How do these 4 teams use their special skills? Well, basically, you put a Kanban board up in front of them, and then they work on the most important things. Again, driven by the MBI. I'm going to do the thing that'll get me the most value. Okay. If I want to go on to some other questions, but if you have more on this, go to, I didn't put it in. I wish I had. You can get onto LinkedIn. Sorry, just went past that. Get into LinkedIn and go to the Disciplined Agile LinkedIn group. I'm going to try to reshare my screen in the meantime. Okay, give me another question. Somebody else.
Is flex an acronym?
I'm sorry, what? Flex and what?
Yeah, David Henson asked the question in the chat. Is flex an acronym?
Oh, yes, it is. It's Flow for Enterprise Transformation. And it basically is an accumulation and integration of the things net objectives. Although we started in 99, around 2005, we started getting to Agile at scale. And it's basically from 2005 to 2017, I guess, we had just used it. About 3 or 4 years ago, I decided to start writing it up as a model. So even though it's just coming out now with the PMI, it actually has a heritage of 16 years.
Yes, one question. How do you drive the engagement of financial teams, like specifically in those complex companies, right? Imagine banks, etc., where if you don't start at the portfolio level, or how do you drive it through discipline, agile, or flex?
Okay, well, you're best off starting at the portfolio level, especially with banks. In fact, I'll give you a case study of a bank we worked with. This is one of the top 5 banks in the world. We didn't work with a whole bank, but we worked with their retail division. And it's where it actually what drives, I think it's kind of a funny story, but it's what drives our portfolio management. So we're sitting with, one of our consultants was there, and we're going to do budgeting through the year. And this Alan Chetowat, our president, did this. And so he's sitting around with all these, the highest ups execs of this division of the bank that does all the retail. And they say, okay, well, now we got to get to the budget. So Alan asked them, he says, well, are you hiring any more people than you had last year? He says, no. Are you firing anybody? He says, no. Oh, then we already have our budget. We know how much money we got. Our budget, we got our budget. That's not the issue. The issue is not budgeting. The issue is allocating the money. So you first got to get that shift right there. How do I allocate my funds? So budgeting is something that says, think of it as I've got multiple pipelines. And that what I'm going to do is I'm going to budget this amount of money for that pipeline, this amount of money, these are the products or whatever. Now, on a quarterly basis, if I'm not doing beyond budgeting, like I said, we try to have a slightly watered down so people will buy into it. On a quarterly basis, I might change the budgets, mean have smaller or bigger pipelines for this. But I don't allocate funds until I have an MBI to start. Now, here's what's also interesting about an MBI I didn't mention. OpEx and CapEx is a big issue and is handled miserably in most places. And the reason, and if you don't know what OpEx or CapEx is, and it's not a problem for you, just count your blessings. Those of you know what I'm saying, it's a pain a lot of the times. And the reason is OpEx is your operational expenses, like IT might do. And if they have an OpEx budget, and then you have somebody who's got a CapEx budget, and you might build something but not get it to be able to be supported, you've got a problem. So all this artificial stuff is, again, because we're budgeting funny things like solutions or epics or features. We need to be budgeting things we're going to build, release, support, and maintain, which is the MBI is the release, but it includes all the expenses to get it out the door. So the way you work with a financial company is start with the budgeting in the different areas they're interested, look at your initiatives, what are the sequence of MBIs going to be, and you start thinking about your budgeting by the area and you're allocating on a lean basis just in time as it's needed. Again, if you're interested in that, I've got my email, the LinkedIn, you can follow me there. If you go to LinkedIn and just search for Disciplined Agile on LinkedIn, you'll get to the discussion group. You can also always ask me questions there. If you shoot me an email that says, that asks me a question, that'll be fine, but I can guarantee you I'm going to ask you to post it on Disciplined Agile. And if it's confidential and you don't want anybody to know, you can shoot me an email, say, hey, I don't want anybody to know who asked this question. I got no problem with that. And then I'll post it for you. And I'll just say somebody asked me that. So if you need more information, that's the way to go with it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.